Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at something I think we all experience, mental health at work. And get this, the average person spends, get this, 90,000 hours at work over a lifetime.
Wow.
That's like a third of your life. It really makes you think, how much of that time are we actually, thriving versus just surviving?
It's a question more and more people are asking, and the impact of ignoring this question is huge. We're not just talking about individual burnout, we're talking about a global cost, a global economic cost. The World Health Organization estimates that $1 trillion are lost every year from decreased productivity due to poor mental health at work.
$1 trillion. Okay, now I'm seeing the bigger picture. But what I find so interesting about this problem is that it's often invisible, unlike a physical injury. How does that invisibility impact how we approach and address mental health in the workplace?
It's a crucial point. That invisibility can lead to stigma and prevent people from seeking help. That's why fostering a culture of openness and psychological safety is so important. We need workplaces where people feel comfortable admitting that they're struggling without fear of judgment or repercussions.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we've got research reports, personal stories, even a company experimenting with Wellness Wednesdays. Let's start with this podcast episode. Mindful moments, mental health awareness in the workplace. They make a point about how ignoring mental health doesn't just lead to burnout, but it has deeper consequences.
Absolutely. They delve into the science behind it. Chronic stress, for instance, can lead to a whole cascade of hormonal changes that disrupt your sleep, weaken your immune system, and even increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. It's not just about feeling tired, it's about real, measurable damage to your body.
Wow, that's a much clearer picture than just saying, burnout leads to health issues.
Ooh.
So it's not just about feeling better, it's about preventing serious health problems down the line. What other insights did you gather from this episode?
Well, they countered that grim reality with something I think quite hopeful. They highlighted research showing that when workplaces actually prioritize mental health, you see a significant increase in employee engagement, creativity, and even a boost to the company's overall performance. It's not just about mitigating damage, it's about unlocking potential.
That's fascinating. So there's a real return on investment when companies invest in their employees' mental health. It's not just a feel-good initiative, it's a smart business strategy. But how do we actually translate that into action? The podcast had a whole section on practical steps companies can take, right?
Yes, and they started with something fundamental: shifting the culture. It's about moving beyond those surface-level awareness campaigns and creating an environment where open conversations about mental health are the norm. Imagine a workplace where saying, "I'm having a tough time mentally," is met with the same level of concern and support as saying, "I have a cold."
That would be a game changer.
Yeah.
But talk is cheap, right? What about concrete support systems?
They emphasize that too. Think access to counseling services, mental health days that are actually encouraged, not just allowed, and robust wellness programs. It's one thing to say, talk about your problems, but if there's no support system in place when people actually do open up, that can do more harm than good.
It can't just be empty words. The support needs to be there. The episode also mentioned the importance of training managers to recognize the signs of struggle in their team members. I imagine that could be tricky.
It is. It requires providing managers with the tools to identify warning signs, but more importantly, how to respond with empathy and understanding. They don't need to be therapists, but knowing how to have a supportive conversation and guide someone towards appropriate resources is incredibly valuable. It could make all the difference between someone seeking help and continuing to suffer in silence.
That's so true. So we're talking about a multi-pronged approach here: cultural shift, resources, trained managers. But the episode also brought up something I hadn't even considered: the impact of flexible work arrangements.
That's become especially relevant in, our post-pandemic world. Allowing for remote work or flexible hours can give employees a greater sense of control over their schedules, which can drastically reduce stress and contribute to a better work-life balance.
It's about recognizing we all have lives outside of work, and sometimes those lives need to take priority. And, it's not always about these big systemic changes. The podcast highlighted a company that was doing something quite simple but effective: Wellness Wednesdays.
Ah, yes. I am interested in unpacking that further, but perhaps we should dive into some of the research reports you've gathered first. They might provide a more nuanced perspective on these different approaches.
Great idea. Let's see what the data says. Okay, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty with some research. I got this report here from the American Psychological Association. It's titled "Creating a Mentally Healthy Workplace," and it's chock full of actionable strategies. One thing that really jumped out at me was this emphasis on leadership. They argue that it's not enough for companies to just talk the talk. Leaders need to walk the walk when it comes to mental health.
Absolutely. The report highlights that leaders really do play a crucial role in shaping that workplace culture. When they openly prioritize their own mental well-being and demonstrate empathy towards their employees, it sends a powerful message. It shows that taking care of your mental health isn't a weakness, it's a sign of strength and self-awareness.
So it's about leading by example. But then there's also the practical side of things, right? How do leaders actually create that supportive environment where employees feel comfortable, using those mental health resources?
Well, the report dives into that, suggesting concrete steps like ensuring that mental health benefits are clearly communicated and easily accessible. Think streamlined processes for taking mental health days, clear guidelines on what's covered by insurance, readily available information about employee assistance programs. It's about removing those barriers, both logistical and psychological, that prevent people from seeking help.
It's about making it easy to prioritize your mental health, not something you have to fight for. The report also mentions something called job crafting. Could you explain that a little more? It sounds intriguing.
Yeah, job crafting is really about empowering employees to personalize their work experience within, the boundaries of their role. It could involve tweaking responsibilities to align with their strengths, finding ways to connect their work to their values, or even seeking out opportunities for collaboration and mentorship. It's about recognizing that even small changes to how someone approaches their work can have a big impact on their overall well-being and engagement.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where individual needs and organizational goals kind of intersect.
Yeah.
And this report argues that when employees are given that agency, it can lead to, a much more positive and productive work environment. I find it fascinating that it shifts the focus from relying solely on the company to provide all the solutions and instead empowering individuals to take ownership of their well-being at work.
Exactly. It's a collaborative approach. And on that note of collaboration, there's another report you wanted to discuss, right? This one from the World Economic Forum. Now, this one's about building a well-being economy. That takes us to a whole other level.
It does. This report takes a much broader perspective, looking at how we can design economic systems that prioritize well-being for everyone, not just in the workplace. They argue that we need to shift our focus from solely measuring economic growth to also considering well-being indicators like happiness, life satisfaction, and mental health. It's a pretty radical idea.
It is. And it challenges some deeply ingrained assumptions about what constitutes success in our society. The report makes a very compelling case that a well-being economy isn't just about warm, fuzzy feelings. It's about creating a more sustainable and equitable future. When people are struggling mentally, it impacts productivity, increases healthcare costs, and can even lead to social unrest. So investing in well-being isn't just the right thing to do ethically, it's also the smart thing to do economically.
So it's about recognizing that our current economic systems, with their relentless focus on growth and profit, often come at the expense of people's mental health. And this approach is ultimately unsustainable. This report isn't just suggesting a few tweaks, it's calling for a fundamental rethinking of how we value work and well-being. But how realistic is that? I mean, it sounds great in theory, but can we actually shift our entire economic paradigm?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The report acknowledges that it's a huge challenge, but argues that it starts with changing the narrative. We need to start valuing well-being as much as we value economic growth. We need to start measuring it, talking about it, and making it a central part of policy decisions. It requires a collaborative effort from businesses, governments, and individuals.
It's a tall order, but I think this report does a great job of outlining the stakes and laying out a roadmap for how we can move towards a more, well-being-centric society. So we've gone from very specific workplace strategies to a vision of a whole new economic system. It's a lot to digest. But before we get too overwhelmed, let's circle back to that Wellness Wednesday initiative. It's a more concrete example of a company putting these principles into action.
Yes, let's dive back into the practical side of things and see how this company translates those big ideas into real-world change.
All right, let's unpack this Wellness Wednesday concept.
Yeah.
It's simple, really. Every Wednesday, this company gives its employees an hour dedicated solely to self-care. No work allowed, no emails, no meetings, just time for themselves.
What's brilliant about this initiative is that it's not just about providing the time, it's about normalizing it. By building it into the company culture, they're making a powerful statement. Taking care of your mental health is not an indulgence, it's an essential part of a productive and fulfilling work life.
And it's not just some feel-good theory. They've actually seen tangible results. Employees report feeling less stressed, more engaged, and even more creative. It's like they've hit the reset button midweek and come back refreshed and ready to tackle challenges with, renewed energy.
It makes you wonder if our traditional view of productivity, where more hours worked equals better results, is actually counterproductive. Perhaps stepping back and recharging allows us to approach our work with more focus, clarity, and even inspiration.
It's like that old saying, work smarter, not harder, but with a mental health twist.
Aye.
This Wellness Wednesday experiment is a really interesting example of a company putting those big ideas we discussed earlier into practice.
Yeah.
It seems like they're taking a multifaceted approach, addressing mental health from various angles.
That's right. And it's not just about one-off initiatives. They're actively fostering a culture where employees feel comfortable talking about mental health and seeking support when they need it. They've invested in training managers to recognize signs of struggle, they offer comprehensive mental health resources, and they're exploring flexible work arrangements to give employees greater control over their schedules. It's a holistic strategy, and the Wellness Wednesday initiative is just one piece of the puzzle.
It's inspiring to see a company actively trying to create a work environment that truly supports employee well-being. But it also makes me wonder, if 1 hour a week can have such a positive impact, what could we achieve if we built in well-being time, every day?
No, that's a fascinating thought. Imagine a world where even just 15 minutes a day were dedicated to mental well-being, whether it's meditation, a walk in nature, listening to music, or simply disconnecting from technology. Those small moments of intentional self-care could have a ripple effect throughout our lives.
It's a powerful image. And it ties back to that vision of a well-being economy we discussed earlier. It's about shifting our priorities, recognizing that investing in our mental health is not a luxury, but a necessity for both individual and collective well-being.
So, dear listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we leave you with this challenge. How can you integrate moments of well-being into your own workday? And if you're in a position of leadership, how can you advocate for a culture that prioritizes mental health? Remember, even small changes can make a big difference.
It all starts with awareness and a willingness to challenge the status quo. It's time to move beyond the stigma and recognize that mental health is not a weakness, but a fundamental aspect of our humanity. Taking care of ourselves is not selfish. It's the foundation for a more productive, fulfilling, and meaningful life.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey. There are countless resources available, like the ones we discussed in this episode, to support you on your path to well-being. Reach out, connect, and start prioritizing your mental health today.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope this exploration has given you some valuable insights and, most importantly, empowered you to take action. Until next time, take care of yourselves.